how to prevent toddler tantrums and meltdowns. That's exactly what we're looking at today. Lots of actionable tips for you to start implementing right away. And if you guys are new here, my name's Rachel from The Confused Mom. Welcome to my channel. I share baby and toddler product reviews, activities, as well as Montessori at home tips. And this video is part of a whole little mini series I'm doing about emotions in our 1 to 6 year olds. So be sure, go back, check out that first video where I talk about the distinction between tantrums and meltdowns and just some big warning signs to look out for in this whole arena, as well as I cover a little bit of my professional background. But I'm a mom of two. I have a 1-year-old and a 3.5-year-old, so I am very familiar with these. And I've been working with kids for like 2 decades now, so I've seen a lot of stuff. So toddler tantrums and how to navigate them. We're going to talk about some preventative stuff as well as what to do in the moment. And we'll talk about how to handle the aftermath in a future video. So toddler tantrums typically happen when their desire for independence or control differentiates from what they're actually allowed or capable of doing. So this could be they want to put on their own shoes yet, but they don't have the skills to do it. The simplest preventative solution is to give them as much independence and control wherever possible. This is where like Montessori parenting really caught a lot of popularity, I feel like, because it started to involve the child in their life. And as a result, we started seeing toddlers with a lot less tantrums between 1 and 3 years old. In Montessori parenting, kids are learning how to get themselves dressed earlier. They are given the choice to choose their clothes and all sorts of other stuff that typically isn't given to a 2-year-old historically. Beyond that, you want to prepare your environment for success. Another Montessori principle here. So if you know that your kid shouldn't play with knives, you're not going to leave the knives somewhere where they can reach them. Recently we went through this. I bought a scooter for my 1-year-old because of Amazon Prime Day. I was taking out to make sure it worked within the return window, but then I planned on putting it away until the holidays. And of course my kids saw it and had a meltdown because they wanted to use it. So I very quickly had to remind my husband a few times to get it out of the house because that was not preparing our environment to avoid tantrums. They saw it, they wanted it, they didn't understand why it was in their space and they couldn't have it, which is a very fair and logical thing to do. Avoid having to take things away from your toddler after they've discovered it by just quickly scanning your room throughout the day, making sure that it is set up for their success. Next thing is going to be to pause before you respond. Sometimes we get into autopilot where just like we have our agenda and anything that gets in that way is like no, 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 which is great. That's how we get through life. That's how we get things done. But especially as our toddlers can start to ask and request certain things, it can be really helpful to pause and think about it. Does it really matter if your toddler wears pajamas to school? Probably not. So let them have that win. Also, want to make sure that you keep your child's limits in mind. So meaning how much time they can be out before they're going to need food or a nap. At the end of the day, you are kind of the gatekeeper here for making sure your kid doesn't get too hungry, tired, and all that type of stuff. Maybe that means saying no to have guests coming over or not squeezing in that 5-minute grocery run because you really need to go, but it's getting close to their nap time in order to set them up for better success. And then lastly, play with your kids. Now this is a thing that's commonly talked about where like you should spend 10 minutes of quality one-on-one time with your kid every day or at least a few times a week. No phones, no distractions, no siblings, no other parents, etc., etc. However, the little part of that people often miss is that during that playtime, you are not to guide it. Essentially what I want you to do is imagine you are visiting a foreign country. Show up with that same amount of humility and respect for learning their customs, their way of doing things. So this is not the time to ask questions about their day and all this other stuff or make suggestions of how to do things differently. That is not the 10 quality minutes of time your toddler needs. Just because you don't have a phone doesn't mean that it is enriching. So really meet your kid where they're at instead of doing that whole mom thing of suggesting other ways or asking questions and da-da-da-da-da. So a lot of people will say ignore the tantrum. This is a very old school behaviorist approach where essentially the idea is behavior modification and cessation. By not rewarding behavior with attention, even if it's negative attention, it still is adding a stimulus to the situation. You are giving the child what they want and they're gonna do it again. My experience as a child myself, this is one of the fastest, most guaranteed ways to end up with a toddler that has a meltdown and eventually like anxiety and all that type of stuff. Now, of course, if you do it once or twice or even a handful of times, you're not going to ruin your kid. But if that becomes your go-to way of handling uncomfortable feelings or toddlers' big emotions, just like be aware. There's consequences to it. Earlier I mentioned knowing your kid's limits with like being hungry and tired. And there's a thing, and like I think it was in the substance abuse world that's popular, it's called HALT, hungry, angry, lonely, tired. Obviously we talked already about being hungry and tired, but like in a tantrum, if your kid is angry, the last thing we want to do is add loneliness to that anger. I think we can apply that same HALT, hungry, angry, lonely, tired to our kids and making sure that those needs are being met. Both in them and ourselves, by the way. So when our kid is having a hard time, one of the best things we can do is just keep ourselves calm, acknowledge as an unbiased narrator what's happening, and hold space for them. When we're narrating the reality of the situation, we want to use as few words as possible. This is not a time to go into a monologue. This is not a time to fall into rationalizing or logic. So basically what that would sound like is, I know you're not happy with my decision right now. I still love you. I'm here when you're ready, and just sit with them. At eye level, not like above them. It shows that we cannot like a choice without like damning the whole person, and also that we're not scared by their darker side, by disagreement in the relationship. The relationship isn't threatened by divergent wants or needs, and that is really important in maintaining relationships throughout their life. You're not trying to talk to them about their behavior, not trying to like appease them or make it go away. This is really like 2 sentences of, hey, I see you, I see where you're at, I got this, we got this, we're good. In addition, while in the middle of the tantrum, I think it's important to stay grounded in your decision. So like if you gave them the blue plate and they wanted the green one and they have a tantrum over that, I wouldn't change my decision even if I had the green plate readily available in that moment. Instead, I would not focus on making the feeling go away. I would focus on letting them finish the feeling through. Once there's enough space between the feeling and whatever it is they want, if I realize like, okay, maybe I was being a little too strict and it's not a big deal if they get the green plate, I would offer it to them. But you don't want it so close together that you're teaching them in order to get their needs met, they need to tantrum. So that's kind of like a little bit of a nuance there to be mindful of. And then if you notice yourself getting angry or yelling in the middle of the tantrum yourself, like their tantrum is very triggering for you, it is okay to remove yourself. Just tell them what's happening. When our kid is having like a harder to deal with emotion, we want them to know that they can handle this, we can handle this. It feels unsafe, but you're still safe, essentially, is kind of like the theme of all these videos to come. And so what that essentially looks like is, mommy needs to go to the bathroom right now. I know you can handle this feeling. You're safe. I will be back in 2 minutes. So you're not just saying mommy needs to leave and then just like leaving them to deal with it, because what that can communicate is, oh, my mom is scared of my big feelings, and that can push you into meltdown range. You want to communicate where they're going. You want to give them a little pep talk about it, and then kind of give them an idea of like, you're not leaving forever. And that way, if you need to go in the bathroom, you need to like take a couple minutes yourself, you can. It's not just abandoning them. Again, we want to avoid instilling loneliness into them with this, but we also, it's okay to like tend to our needs so that we can come back and not make the situation worse. Now, with that said, if you do yell, it happens. Don't beat yourself up. You can always go back, repair the situation after you're not in the midst of it, which we'll talk more about in a future video. But that would be kind of my way of giving yourself a pause in the moment. And then as far as what to do after a tantrum, you're gonna want to just acknowledge what happened as an unbiased narrator. So what that could sound like is, you really wanted the blue plate, not the green one I gave you. I didn't know that. You felt angry about my choice. Thank you for telling me. By modeling a calm response back to such a big reaction to such a simple situation, eventually your toddler kind of will like notice the ridiculousness of it all as they get older. It's training you to take responsibility, to not avoid conflict, showing them how to have healthy conflicts, showing them that it's safe to have disagreements, all very little important things that can feel just very foreign to us as parents. And then you can also use play to process what happened. This is especially helpful if you lost your temper too during the tantrum, but that will be an entirely different video in this series. How to navigate toddler and preschooler meltdowns. Again, we're going to talk preventative and and during, just like before. Meltdowns are going to be a little bit different than tantrums because they typically have a layer beneath them than just the tantrum. Like I said before, these can be related to sensory overload. These can also be related to gut imbalances as well as hormone, mineral imbalances. There can be like some health stuff going on too. So just kind of keep that in mind. Diet. But as far as preventing meltdowns in young kids, some basic things to do, obviously screen time. Limit it as much as possible, especially 2 hours before bed or before activities that maybe you see your child getting a little anxious or nervous about. I probably wouldn't use screen time to decompress before said activity. Making sure they're getting a good night's sleep. Eating nutrient-dense foods is another really big one. That's something I'm going to talk way more about, nutrient-dense foods for baby as well as the whole family, in my baby-led weaning series, which will be coming out in the fall, so like after I wrap up all these videos. So definitely, again, hit that subscribe and notification bell. Consider a probiotic or working with a specialized health practitioner, especially if your child has a history. Maybe they had cradle cap as baby, maybe they had eczema, even if they grew out of it. These all signal fungal or bacterial overgrowths of some sort. So even if they're no longer currently struggling with that, if you are struggling with meltdowns, I would probably work with somebody based off of personal experience here. Keeping an eye out for low simmer signs of dysregulation. So this could be whining, this could be them walking around with fists, this could be them being a little bit more hyperactive. It could even be like they're just overly lethargic or moody. Those are all low simmer signs that a meltdown could be on the horizon. Lastly, for preventative, you just want to listen to your kids. But if they say they don't want that shirt, even though you might think it's silly, it could be like a sensory thing. That material of that shirt is just a sensory input that's too much for them. If they say they don't want to go somewhere, obviously we don't want our child to avoid going places, to feel like they can just say I don't want to go and they get to avoid doing anything. Maybe be a little bit flexible until you can figure out why it is they don't want to go there, because again, kids this age may not have the words to express what's coming up for them in those environments, and so them just trying to not wear something, not do something could be their way of protecting their sensory input, protecting their nervous system. If you are kind of struggling with like, I don't know why they don't want to go somewhere, that's where that video on play is going to come in really handy to gather some data that maybe you're not getting from them verbally through just talking. And then as far as handling toddler meltdowns in the moment, it's very similar to handling toddler tantrums in the moment. You really just want to be with them. Don't leave them in the room to handle it themselves. Show them that their big feelings don't scare you, that you can handle it, that you're gonna get through this. Show them what it looks like on the other side of the meltdown, essentially. Don't forget to hit that subscribe and notification bell for that next series of strategies when it comes to more like safety and containment, and that is like a very taboo topic I'm excited to cover because a lot of people don't talk about it. If you enjoyed this video, make sure to give it a thumbs up, share it with a friend, let me know in the comments which strategy you guys are going to try out. I'd love to know. Be sure to go back and check out the previous videos in this emotion series as well as my Montessori at home tips series. As always, my name's Rachel. Have a good one.